Hello, this is Mike Volkov. In today's video, I'll be talking about Gaahlerie's new airbrush. I tested what the Seeker can really do. I used it with acrylic and more aggressive lacquer paints, sprayed primer and varnish with it, and I'll tell you exactly how it performed. I'll also show you how to clean it and how to swap the needle and nozzle. At the end of the video, I'll give you a quick summary, and you'll also find a link and a coupon in the description that gives you a small discount if you decide to get a Seeker. I'm not going to do a full unboxing, because you've probably seen plenty of those since the airbrush came out in February. Instead, let's quickly check what's in the box and what I'll be testing today. Under an easy-to-understand and well-illustrated quick start guide, you'll find a small bag with spare seals. These will wear out eventually, so it's something you'll need down the line. It's a nice touch that they include them right away. And here's the star of today's video. Gaahlerie's new entry-level airbrush, the Seeker. It's basically an upgraded version of the Gaahleri 39. According to the manufacturer, it's designed to be affordable while still handling both fine detail work and larger areas with ease, making it a pretty versatile tool for all kinds of projects. I'm about to find out if that's really true. But first, I should mention that I received this airbrush from Gaahleri for testing. That doesn't mean I'll only say nice things about it. So let's start right away with something that feels a bit unusual to me. The trigger. To me it feels a bit unusual, and I'm not sure how easy it'll be to get used to this rounded, mushroom-shaped trigger design. The airbrush will stay with me and I'll be using it quite a lot, so later on I'll be able to share more thoughts about it. In the box, you get a standard 1/3 ounce paint cup with a lid. Gaahleri mainly designed the Seeker for acrylic paints, and the internal coating is optimized for that. But if you use it carefully, don't let paint dry inside and avoid harsh solvents, it should hold up well. In the video, I'll show you how I usually clean my airbrush. In the box, you also get both a 0.3mm and a 0.5mm needle and nozzle. That's one of the reasons I think the Seeker offers great value, because you're basically getting two different airbrush setups for the price of one. I can't believe I can't get this out. There we go. And this is really the heart of the Seeker. Its unique 6-channel quick-release nozzle. Compared to the traditional advanced nozzle, it's longer and easier to install and remove. Thanks to this special design, it sprays totally differently from regular airbrush. If you look closely, you won't mix up which nozzle goes with which needle, because the manufacturer marked the matching pairs with a small engraved line. The dual-action label on the box means the trigger does two things. Press it down to control the airflow, and pull it back to control how much paint comes out. There's also an adjuster at the back of the airbrush that lets you limit how far the trigger can be pulled. That way, you can prevent more paint from coming out than the amount you've set. You also get a quick connector in the box, which is really handy if you have one hose but use several airbrushes. If your hose doesn't have this type of fitting, you can just screw the airbrush directly onto the hose and skip the quick connector. And now it's ready to use, so let's start painting. I use the Seeker with Mr. Finishing Surfacer Primer, water-based Vallejo Model Color, AK Real Color Lacquer Paint, undiluted acrylic lacquer, and Mr. Color Gloss Varnish. For each paint, I used its own dedicated thinner, but I also tested it with some completely wrong thinning ratios just to see how it behaves. First I started with Surfacer Primer, which I thinned with leveling thinner. A 0.5mm needle would be better for primers and varnishes. But let's see how it works with a 0.3mm needle. You can see bubbles coming up in the paint cup here. That's because I didn't tighten the nozzle cap enough and air is getting in. Just tighten it properly and it should be fine. Whatever paint you use, the key is smooth, controlled movement. Spray from about 10 to 12 centimeters away and move the airbrush in steady, parallel passes, with each pass overlapping the previous one by about 50%. If you spray too close, the paint will start to run. If you're too far away, the paint can dry in the air and the finish will look dusty. Don't change direction right over the surface you're painting. Let the airbrush pass slightly beyond it before turning back. Surfacer already covers pretty well in a single coat. But if you want the best finish, it's better to build it up with several thin layers. As a primer coat, this surface looks perfectly fine. I usually test my paint on small plastic cards like this before spraying it on an actual model. Off camera, I also primed the tail of a MiG-23 the same way, and will paint that too. Before painting, I usually gently sand the surface with a wet sanding sponge to make it nice and smooth. I'm mentioning all this because the Seeker is an entry-level airbrush, so it's a great choice for someone who is just getting into scale modeling. However, it's important not only to have good tools, but also to use the right technique. I started the painting with water-based Vallejo paint, since the Seeker was mainly designed for acrylics. The model color range is actually intended more for brush painting, but you can still airbrush it. I'm using it here simply because I don't have any Vallejo air on hand right now. Water-based paints don't cover particularly well, so you'll definitely need to build them up with several thin coats. A bit of flow improver would have helped here, but I'm still pretty happy with the result. Next up is a paint from Model Paint Company, which is a much more aggressive Australian lacquer paint. This one doesn't need any thinning. I'm just using it straight from the bottle. This is a different type of paint than the previous one. As you can see, it already covers the black primer with just a single thin coat. The result is a nice, even surface. It looks a little streaky right now, but another coat would easily smooth that out. Instead of adding another layer, let's see how it looks on an aircraft. Thanks to the 6 air channels on the nozzle, it really is that easy to spray a smooth finish, just like you can see in the video. Now let's try it with a more familiar paint, AK Real Color Lacquer. Looks like I should have tightened the cap on this thinner properly. First, I'm going to intentionally mix a bad ratio, adding too little thinner to see how the Seeker handles thicker paint. After that, I'll also try the opposite and test it with paint that's too thin. I'm showing these clips sped up because the footage itself isn't the important part. The key thing is what I noticed while painting. To me, the Seeker feels much more forgiving. Even if your paint is a bit too thick or too thin, it's still quite easy to get a good result. The air channel nozzle probably plays a big role in that. Of course, this isn't a scientific test, just my own experience while using it. Even with the wrong thinning ratios, the result turned out pretty good. But now, let's see how the Seeker performs when I want to paint smaller, more precise areas. So far, I've been using the 0.3mm nozzle the entire time, but when we get to the clear coat, you'll see what it's like to work with the 0.5mm setup. I'm still using the same slightly overthinned mix in the airbrush, about a 70-30 ratio. Because of that, I need to build it up with several thin layers so the blue can cover the black. Normally, if you're using real color, you wouldn't need this much thinner. Even so, the Seeker handles this ratio really well. The finish came out nice and even, and there were no paint runs anywhere. Let's see what the spray pattern of the Seeker looks like with this mixture. Then, I'll add even more thinner, making it really thin, around a 90-10 ratio. Even though this airbrush wasn't really designed for precision work, I was curious to see how it would handle thin lines or a freehand camouflage pattern. In my opinion, the Seeker is perfectly usable for this kind of work in 1:72 scale. So now I'm adding a little white to the mix and lightening the centers of the panels. Normally, experienced users say you shouldn't mix paint directly in the cup, but every now and then it's fine. As you can see, I didn't really pay attention to the exact thinning ratios, and I honestly have no idea what pressure I'm spraying at because my pressure gauge isn't working. But it doesn't really matter. The Seeker handled it just fine, and I was able to paint the panels without any paint runs. Now I'm adding a bit of dark gray and trying some post shading along the panel lines. I could probably spray even thinner lines if I removed the needle cap, but I didn't do that this time. Like I said earlier, The Seeker's 0.3mm setup isn't really meant for precision work, but even so, this is still a pretty nice result. Finally, I'll thin the mix even more to see how well it can mist lacquer paint in very thin layers. Honestly, so far the Gaahleri Seeker has turned out to be an excellent tool for me. Let me show you how I usually clean my airbrushes at the end of the day. It's worth taking the time to do it properly. Otherwise, the paint can dry inside so badly that you'll only be able to get it out with aggressive solvents. For cleaning, I always use the same thinner I used for the paint. Since I sprayed lacquer paint this time, leveling thinner works perfectly for cleaning. First, I wipe the cup clean with a cotton swab dipped in thinner. Then I take the airbrush apart. After loosening the back screw, you can push the needle forward and wipe it down thoroughly as well. Cleaning does use quite a bit of thinner, but trust me, it's worth doing regularly because dried paint on the parts can cause a lot of headaches later. According to Gaahlerie's guide, the needle should be inserted from the back of the airbrush. Personally, I don't recommend that because it's pretty easy to damage the tip, which affects its precision. Instead, I usually slide the needle back in from the front of the airbrush. There's much less chance of damaging it that way. Once I'm done cleaning and everything is screwed back in tightly, I pour a little clean thinner into the airbrush and check if it seals properly. If it doesn't, you'll see bubbles appear, just like you saw earlier in the video. Then I spray a bit of thinner through it and leave it like that until the next painting session. If you're spraying varnish, primer, or just covering larger areas, it's a good idea to switch to the larger needle. Since I'm about to apply a clear coat, I'm swapping the 0.3mm setup for the 0.5mm one. Taking it apart and putting it back together is basically the same as during cleaning. Just make sure to use the larger nozzle with the larger needle. They're marked with an engraved line so you don't accidentally mix them up. And that's it. Let's try the Seeker with some gloss clear coat. I'll be using Mr. Color GX 100 Gloss Varnish, mixing about 3 parts varnish to 7 parts leveling thinner. This ratio usually works well because the varnish is quite thick and needs enough thinner to level out nicely. The leveling thinner also contains a bit of retarder, which helps the finish flow better. The best approach would normally be to start with a very thin tack coat to help the varnish stick, but I'm skipping that step this time. After that, instead of many thin layers, the varnish should be applied in 1 or maybe 2 wetter coats with this thinning ratio. That's what allows it to level out and create a nice, mirror-smooth, glossy finish. On the blue side, there are 2 coats of gloss varnish. This is the result I got with the Seeker. Most experienced users already have their go-to thinning ratios for different types of paint, usually somewhere between 50 to 50 and 70 to 30%, and most general-purpose airbrushes work best somewhere in that range. But during this test, I noticed that with the Seeker, you can get good results in a much wider range without splattering or paint runs. Conclusion: If you're already an experienced user with a general-purpose airbrush and you're thinking about switching, the Seeker is a solid and affordable option. That said, in my opinion, those users might be better off with the Mobius model, which offers a bit more versatility. If you're just getting into scale modeling, first of all, welcome to our community. It's a fantastic creative hobby, and you're going to have a lot of great experiences with it. The Gaahleri Seeker is a great choice for beginners, and it can easily serve you well during your first years in the hobby, and even beyond. Based on my first impressions, I can definitely recommend it. In fact, I'm keeping this one. I'm not sending it back to Gaahleri. That's all for now, but I'll be using it regularly. And I also have a dedicated Blackhawk project planned that I'll paint entirely with this airbrush. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll be able to see much more about it. If you decide to get yourself a Seeker, use the link and coupon in the description. You'll get a small discount, and you'll also support my channel. And if you already have some experience with the Seeker airbrush, feel free to share it in the comments. Thanks for watching.